Oh, right. Yeah, eDub trips.
So
Yeah. Okay.
trips will be, and that will be maybe
Oh my
2013 or
gosh.
2014.
2014.
Yeah.
On May
Yeah.
26th, we got the first email from you guys, and it was actually from Jillian.
Okay. That's my mum.
Oh, no way. Oh, that's so cool.
So hello everyone, welcome to another video here from eDub Services, and here in partnership with EV West and speaking to the incredible Michael Bream. Michael, how are you doing?
Oh, fantastic, Kit. Thank you so much. Good to be with
Good.
you.
It's really great to talk to you. And we actually just, I'm doing my formal introduction now, but we've just been
Yeah.
nattering for about 10,
Yeah,
15
right.
minutes going on about, because we can't just start a call being all formal. We've got so much backstory. But that was
Yeah.
our
I mean,
formal beginning.
some people would call this work, but to me, I would do this any day of the week, hang out, talk Volkswagens, talk electric cars, adventure camping. Yeah.
Yeah.
Checks all my boxes. Yeah.
All day. Yeah, if we could get away
Yeah.
with it, we would, wouldn't we? We'd just talk
Right.
all day.
Yeah.
Perfect. But I wanted to spend some time because we'll go into this in the video about EV West and eDub have got a
Yeah.
long-standing history.
Yeah, we were
And
just looking back at our communications and figured out that we have a decade old relationship
mm,
at this
we
point, and that's
do.
fantastic. But I do have to say, Kit, that your company is very well, rare in the fact that you've been doing this for over a decade now. You've been in this constant growth pattern, and you've really always kind of had your eye on the market, the demographic that really wants this stuff. We do have a lot of long relationships with other companies, but some of them are more specialty or niche oriented, where you're kind of more broad. Like I see your demographic is pretty wide open. There's a lot of people that would enjoy that product.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And it is, as we said before, I would happily natter about it all day if I
Yeah.
could get away with it. Um, but to kick us off, really, I wanted
Yeah.
to, if you could just give us kind of the elevator pitch of EV West, but then if you could go and tell us about the origins of why EV West started,
Yeah.
and kind of give us a
Yeah.
bit of a history tour of that.
I'd love to. Yeah. So, I'm a computer engineer, but I'm a son of a hot rodder. My dad grew up in car culture, in North Hollywood, kind of like an epicenter of all this stuff. I mean, he hung out with guys like Von Dutch, back in the day. And so I've always, he kind of instilled that to me early on. I mean, I was working on cars. I did my first motor swap before I even had a driver's license at 15 years old. And so I've always really enjoyed working on cars. I get my degree, I go into some other lines of work, and started to some friends and I started racing cars in an amateur race league out here in California, and we're having a ton of fun. We would race, a half dozen races a year on the weekends, and I was just having a lot of fun with it. And I started to use some of my technical background to kind of skirt the rules, not really skirt the rules, but just get away with this, because a lot of times in auto racing, it's not what's in the rules, it's what's not in the
Yeah,
rules.
yeah.
So we did a car, and we built an active aero system on it. And so we could change the angle of our rear wing, depending on if you were turning or braking or whatever. And I ran the whole thing off a little microcontroller, a Raspberry Pi, and we were on a
Yeah.
budget limited thing, so we had to proof out, every penny that we spent, and it really got my interest. I was like, this is my zone. I'm in my lane now. I love this stuff, and I was just thinking of an application where I could use those skills. Like, what could I do that would kind of further this? And at the time, we were racing BMWs. We had an E30 race car that we had built, and then we subsequently built an E34 race car. And I just kind of said, like, I'd love to build an E36 race car and go
Yeah.
race. And looked around, and there was really no venue for electric racing. I mean, this was back in, well, we started in 2009. So we looked around for like, what's a true racer's race? and we settled on Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. It's at this point, a 102-year-old race. I think back then we ran in like the 91st running or something like
Yeah.
that. But it's over 100 years old. It's the second oldest race in America, only behind the Indianapolis 500. So very well respected, huge international turnout, teams come from all over the world for it. And we just felt like this is where we belonged when we reached out to the organizers and we got a rule book. It was very extensive, and we started asking about EV rules, and they actually reached out and were very open, said, "Hey, can you help us galvanize some of these rules?" And that's when we knew, okay, we're in the right spot. These guys, they see it. They see the potential for this electric vehicle racing. It's a high altitude race. So some of the electric cars have an advantage, without the lack of oxygen and things that, plague internal combustion. And so that was it. We built a car. We went to Pikes Peak, ended up getting a class record, which we didn't expect at all. And we even beat like the Munster Tajima GoPro car. And when we came home from that, it was just so apparent. There was such a feeling of the electric drivetrain puts an advantage in the hands of those that don't have like a capital advantage, right? So many people were just fixated on how to solve that problem, but they weren't at all focused on the car.
Yeah.
They were literally taking Volkswagens, tearing out the whole entire interior, throwing 2,000 pounds of lead acid batteries in there,
Yeah.
and then saying, "Hey, I created something," without realizing that they destroyed something very precious in the process.
Yes.
And that was our angle. Like, we're not here to save the environment. We need to be here to save these cars. These cars are precious. There's a finite amount of them, and there are fewer and fewer of them every day. And so we just focused on that. And in the beginning, it wasn't, I think people weren't expecting that. People would still come to us and talk to us about, how much money am I going to save on gas? And, first of all, if you're trying to save money on gas, you don't go start a 30, 40, $50,000 EV conversion, put that into a gas fund and you'll have gas for the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
it's really this bigger picture, like really focusing on car enthusiasts that, would go through the extra effort to have something that's really unique, and interesting. And it kind of, in a day and age when, you're like, okay, I got this bus from the 70s, it's 50 years old. What can I possibly do to this bus that's new and unique? And electrification is not new, right? Even Volkswagen in the 70s was electrifying their
Yes.
own. But what's unique is the ability to finally build a performance-oriented bus, right? Like basically all the electric buses until kind of when we got involved around that 2009, 2010 mark, were just so low on power, they were essentially stock. You take a 36 or a 40 horsepower engine out and put a 40 horsepower electric drive unit in it,
Yeah.
add 1,000 pounds of battery or more to the bus, and you truly end up with something that has worse performance than what you started with. So, again, you destroyed something in the process. And so we just really wanted to focus on that. Like, and with the advent of the lithium battery, that was, the impetus for that change is being able to put a battery in the bus that will give you 100 miles of range and still be well under the gross vehicle weight rating. So you can actually throw some kids in there and some food and go camping and have fun. And so that the spirit of all that just really revolved around the vehicle. What can we do to make the vehicle the best that it can possibly be?
Yes.
Yeah, just lightning speed, So guys like you and I we feel like we're kind of leading the charge, but at the same time, we're also just trying to, stay caught up to everything. And that's fun. That's exciting, right? To come into work and see, new technologies, new players, new products. Very exciting time to be involved in this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think it's one of those where our fingers really on the pulse of not just a little moment within technology and how that's advanced, but also, like you say, it's reflecting on economy and on the big players and the small players, and then it goes even further than that when you start to think about the emotion of the driver and the reason for doing it, like you say, is and we find this a lot with our customers is we get, especially because we run our The camper we first converted with your system was is still available for hire. She's outside
Yeah.
right now.
Ah,
And
great.
so
I can come rent
she's still
her.
there. But it's that so many people come to us with that concept of, like you say, that they're maybe not and again, the VW buses have this reputation for you need to be able to be a mechanic to really own one. You've got to
Right.
be able to fix an engine
Yeah.
when you've got a traditional bus. And there are loads of people that come to us and go, do you know what? I'd love that, the dream of the camper, but I'm nowhere near going to be any level of mechanical expertise with it. So, and that's really amazing to let them, yes, to convert the campers like the ones I have behind me that are for private customers, but also to let people just kind of try before they buy, and to take
Yeah.
Indy away for a weekend
Yeah.
and to come back and just be absolutely blown away. And I think the thing that constantly blows me away with that is we've constantly got really great reviews on our hire platform, even when things haven't gone quite to plan. So even when some classic car things don't quite work, like we had a hire in January and the gear stick snapped. Just classic car things, and you kind of go, oh my
Uh,
goodness. But then they come back and they're like, it was a
yeah.
great time.
You mentioned earlier, you had a neat comment about the emotion.
Mm,
And I don't want it to get lost that we're in this really, really special time, right? So if you look at cars kind of before the 50s, they're not really good candidates to convert because they're not really good drivers. They didn't
yeah.
really drive well. For the most part, the brakes, the chassis, the handling were not really safe, right? It's not a car that you could drive every single day. And then you get into this period of the 60s and 70s, and you've got cars now that can be daily drivers, buses, the Porsche behind you. Back in the 60s, those things came with four-wheel disc brakes and independent suspension and, kind of all these systems that modern cars have, but they still carried over the styling and the feel and the emotion of a true vintage car.
Mm.
And then you go forward into kind of the 70s and 80s, and you start getting all the plastic bits
Yeah.
and the big foam dash and all these things, and then they've kind of lost that soul. And what's unique about it is this occurred, we were afforded the lithium batteries at a time where guys like you and I, these cars are still sentimental to us, right? So in other words, if you're looking at customers where something like a early Model T is sentimental to them, those customers are so old now. The customers that were driving those cars when they were young are now so old that they're probably past a time where they're like, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to go convert my Model T. But guys like you and I grew up, our parents drove these cars. Our first memories, our road trips, everything were done in these exact vehicles that we're converting now. So yeah, right? The more you think about this, you have to appreciate how truly special it is that we were afforded this opportunity, right? My kid, when he gets to be my age and starts, fooling around with this stuff, these cars aren't from his generation, right? All his friends are getting driven to school and, Nissan Leafs and Fiat 500s and stuff like that. So they don't really have that like car culture unless they have parents like me that drag them to car shows every weekend and show them all the vintage stuff. So it's really unique because we get to convert cars that were emotional to us. Like you said, there's a very much this emotional element involved. And I think a lot of it has to do with our proximity to these cars. We're not so removed from them, and we get to see the immediate benefits of electrifying them. And so that's really special. So anyone who's involved in that right now, I think should really appreciate the fact that we're in a timeline that, 50 years from now, they're still going to be converting 60s buses. Like your bus, Indy,
Yeah.
if you didn't convert it and clean it up and do what you did to it, it would probably be in some state of disrepair.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the converse is some restoration guy buys your bus, goes and destroys two other buses to cut out
Yes.
donor vehicles. No, this is common. It's
Yeah.
terrible. The guys will go and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm doing the industry a favor. I saved this bus." And there's two chopped up buses out behind their shop that they use to build this bus,
Yeah.
And so, it's kind of neat to have this ability to put these electric drives and actually get them out there and drive them. It hasn't turned into a museum queen or a car show queen where you don't see it.
Mm.
Your bus, Indy, is a good example. It actually gets to be seen driving around, and people, go to some campground and they run into a nice couple camping in your bus and they get a chat
Mm.
with them about it and stuff. And if it wasn't for the electrification, there's a really, really good chance that Indy would not be out driving around. Certainly wouldn't be getting the miles that your bus is getting. And so it's weird. You see, like, you're talking some of these companies coming out and they're either trying to sell, basically what you do for, six figures, $200,000, $300,000.
Yeah.
And it's just not practical, right?
Yeah.
Like, I understand there's a market for that in the same way that there's a market for a Bugatti Veyron, but most people don't have a Bugatti Veyron because it's not a practical car. You can't go run groceries and camp and pick up the kids, more than one kid from school in it.
Yeah.
And so I think, I see companies kind of focus on that. I really love your business model. I've always been like, definitely keeping like an eye on you guys because I just thought it was cool. Like, it was something, anytime I see something that I would do, right, we take more of an interest in it. And I'm the type of guy that would go on vacation with my wife and kid to England and rent your bus.
Yeah.
And that's really cool, right? To sit there and be like, holy moly, we have a customer in England that we're helping out, and they're doing literally what I would want to do. I'm not going to go out and buy a $300,000 bus. I'm not going to try and convert a big rig. I'm not going to try and do any of this stuff. But I do very often go camping in my own bus. And so that to me just has so much practicality built into it. Those are the types of programs that we see as successful, especially once you get the word out there. Usually the toughest thing is just getting the word out. Like, hey, did you know there's these cool retro campers that are kind of technical because they're EVs? And, it's kind of you kind of combine a couple experiences in once, kind
Yeah.
of like the Turo car rental thing, but then you also have this EV and thing, which is really cool on its own. But then you put that extra veneer of the vintage Volkswagen bus, and you just have like basically a home run.
Yeah. Yeah. We always think the same thing is that, these vehicles, campers specifically, have been around for 50 years. And
Yeah.
if you don't electrify them, then anybody would say they're kind of in their vintage years. They're in their golden years. They're coming towards the end of their life. Engine, they're going to keep breaking down. Engine parts are hard to get hold of, or you have to get kind of cheaply remade parts. But yeah, we always say with electrification, there's no reason why these can't last another 50 years. 100%. We say that all the time because it's true, is the bottom line of it. And if we can make them easier to use, more fun to use, if we can, because they are brilliantly fun vehicles, then why not? Why shouldn't we?
That's the irony of what we do, right? You kind of have these sideline purists that think, oh, maybe you shouldn't be doing this. This isn't stock, There's
Yeah.
Volkswagen clubs out here in California that their byline is literally keep it stock,
Yeah.
But I think what happens is if you try and do that, it's really frustrating. Like, you can't drive a stock bus on the highway or on the freeway in Southern California. You'll get mowed over. Everybody's going 70 to 80 miles an hour. You know, a Hyper 9, an AC50, any kind of bus conversion, no problem. We can hold 60, 70, 80 miles an hour all day long. I got dual motors in mine. I can hold 120 if I want,
Yeah.
So that's neat, like now I've got drivability. I have no problems getting in my bus, getting on the freeway and driving all the way up to Los Angeles and back. Things that you would just, if I talked to like actual Volkswagen bus owners with gas engines, they would be like, no, I would never do that. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So it's funny. That's the irony, these guys think, oh, that you're really ruining this thing. But I think when they scratch beneath the surface, they realize that guys like you and I aren't making any non-reversible changes to the platform. We're putting in kits that for the most part bolt in to the cars, and can be removed at a later date. Let's say they figure out, you had the Volkswagen bus that, uh, carried the Treaty of Versailles in it or something, just some crazy story. And
Yeah.
it's got provenance. They can go back and like actually rebuild the bus to original. Gone are the days of cutting out the interior and putting in the 2 tons of lead acid batteries and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a really neat time now because we can do these systems. We can get the performance that we want. We can get the range that we want, and ultimately save the vehicle and not have to do like non-reversible fabrication to the vehicle. So that's never really existed until this timeline that we're on right now that just started, a decade and a half ago.
I'm curious. I want to know more about the projects that I suppose really stand out for you from EV West's back catalogue. Have there been any particular projects that have really stood out in the legacy of the company?
God, it's such a common question, and it is probably the most difficult question for me to answer, right? I'm a car guy, and once you see one, you want to see them all, And so, usually my default answer is my next conversion is my favorite one. Because I know going into that conversion, I'm going to take the last 15 years of what we've done with us and try to improve that. Right. And so it's like, and we're here for different reasons now. In the beginning, we would build something and you try to tell people about it and they just didn't understand, like, and so we were pretty big on having shop vehicles, like come out and drive this thing and come check it out. And, maybe a magazine or something online would want to do something on you, and they just didn't understand like what you're doing. And so we were so focused on, we were actually purchasing our own vehicles, several Volkswagen buses, bugs, some off-road stuff. And we were building our own cars just to keep here kind of in our stable of cars so customers could come out and actually drive the cars. We were, let's build a Baja race car and go race, be the first people to finish the Mexican 1000 in an electric car. Let's go, do drifting. Let's do hill climb, rock crawling. We built a Bonneville land speed car. I mean, we went and raced on dried salt, So we were trying all these things to get the story out there, get the mess. It was all about messaging, like if these total idiots that have never been to Bonneville in their life can build a car in a couple months and go out to Bonneville and get some land speed record that these old codgers have been chasing for like 100 years. And there's got to be something to it, right? There's a catalyst for this, And what we've seen now, thanks to you and several others, is now you're putting out your own media. You're very professional, very organized. In fact, anybody sign up for his newsletter, you'll get cool stuff, But we get this, basically an army of people like you building content now. And so it's been really good for us because we don't have to stay on that messaging. Now, companies and outfits like you are convincing people that this is real, this works. Like, here's your demand, here's your desire for this product. You ran into somebody camping in an actual bus at a campground, or I saw a video on somebody that took a road trip in your bus. And now I have that demand. I'm like, okay, that's what I want to do. But that first 10 years, we were our own marketing committee, kind of for the EV industry, just really trying to show people, no, this is a performance thing. We changed a lot of minds. We've had a lot of automotive celebrities come through here and drive our 1,000 horsepower E36, and they get out of the car and they're just like, we had no idea. They literally had no idea that something like that could exist, that kind of violent power in an EV drivetrain, and it was great. It made us feel good because we were turning people onto it, but the end result was you converted somebody. Now that person is going to go out and kind of sing those praises. We've had, Formula D professional race car drivers come in here, drive our car, and then go out, partner up with Ford and build, their version of it and stuff like that. And a lot of those projects wouldn't have gotten done without kind of the proof of concept and other smaller EV shops similar to ours kind of leading the way, with their kind of, avant-garde kind of projects. The key is to, aim high,
Mm,
right? Try and do
mm.
something new, try and do something unique. And there's so many independent shops doing that right now. It's just a fantastic time because it's really coming from all directions.
It's really fascinating. We find, and we spoke about this a little bit with like the buses have a certain culture about them, and what we found with a lot of the guys that come in touch with us are, yes, some of them are in the an older generation who either had them when they were younger or got that real nostalgia about them, but we get a ton of people who are the younger generation who have never really been in one, but the kind of social media culture has publicized them to such great efficiency without anyone trying,
Right.
just because of the
Right.
design of classic buses. And so you get these people that come along to it, and so many of our customers, I would say about 80% of our hire customers have never driven a classic and maybe never driven an EV. So
Right.
it's a complete baptism of fire, but it's so quirky and so cool that they just couldn't resist. And obviously
Yeah.
they get into Indy and they take her away for a weekend and they're sold on both.
I mean, we're seeing the same exact thing that you're seeing, that this kind of rejuvenates an enthusiasm for car culture. It's not,
Yeah.
it's so easy to dismiss this as, oh, this is an environmental thing or whatever. But no, it's not. Like, if you pick the main reason why people do this, it's truly for the love of driving. But I remember being younger and I did a rebuild on my engine. And, probably for the next couple months, like every time I'd start it, I would just be so ginger, right? You'd start it, not rev it. Okay, let the oil warm up,
Yeah.
okay, cool, we're good. You start driving it, and then you're like, wait, what's that noise? Am I hearing a tick?
Yeah.
Am I pre-detonating? Is that bad? Oh shit, is that my valves? And you're just always second guessing it, and
Yeah.
just always trying to baby it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you have this mechanical piece that really does have a fixed amount of revolutions that engine's going to do,
Yeah.
right? So every hour of runtime that you put on it is one less hour before it needs to be rebuilt again
Yeah.
or completely retired. And then you kind of take that over to the electrics, and it's like, something like an AC50, it's an induction motor. You just keep swapping those shaft bearings, and that thing will literally run for as long as the element copper remains copper. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, it
Yeah.
doesn't have a lifetime on it. And so that's fascinating to have that. And the other thing is what I like, these electric drivetrains don't need to be warmed up. I can go out to
Mm.
my car. Oh, I got to go to the store. And with my vintage engine, I'd have to start it, let it idle and warm up. And that was such a hassle. I would go take my modern car. And now I'm not driving the fun car. I'm driving, my generic box,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's neat because now it's like, oh, I got to go to the market. I run outside, turn the key in my bus, and just stomp on the gas pedal. And I've got full horsepower and I go ripping around, and I don't have to worry about my vehicle anymore. I'm just having fun driving it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And that needs to stay the best. We say this to customers as well, because again, one of the big things within which has now happened in the last few years with the electric vehicle market is it has always been about more and more and more power. And
Yeah.
that has its place and that's great. But what we always say to people is if the vehicle isn't fun to drive or isn't nice to drive or doesn't suit what you want it to feel like to
Yes.
drive, then it's a
Yes.
waste of time.
Yeah.
And actually if you got when we've got Tesla drive units in some of these campers, if you leave them turned up to 100%, you've got no headrests. Like if someone doesn't
Yeah.
want that and that's not what they're expecting and they put their foot down, they're going to hurt themselves.
What's available to us, the Tesla drive unit is probably the best solution, especially for any camper bus.
Mm,
A standard bus is a little bit lighter, and you can get away with like a Hyper 9 or a AC50 or something like that.
yeah.
But once you get into like, okay, I got cabinets, I've got some water storage and things like that, you start getting the weight up there where you really do need a Tesla drivetrain. And people are like immediately, what do you need 300 horsepower for? And you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
it's like a stereo. I got a power knob and I can just turn it
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
right to the appropriate amount of power for this.
Exactly.
Uh, and that's something that we've never had that ability before. Just curious, what kind of efficiency are you getting out of your Tesla driven campers?
So we get somewhere between 2.6 and 2.8 kilowatt hour miles per
Okay.
kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
So, and that depends mostly on the aerodynamics of the vehicle. So
Yeah.
we rate them all around the same, which is around 100 brake horsepower, 110 brake horsepower. And that works fine because it's one of those where it's like people expect you to be slow. So they're very
Yeah.
sympathetic. They're okay with it. And so most of our driving, obviously, if people want to come to us and say, hey, I want a Tesla drive unit, but I want it at Tesla power, then it's
Yeah.
okay. Let's have more conversations about your brakes then before we
Yeah. I
do
was gonna
anything
say, if you want
else.
Tesla power, you need Tesla brakes, Tesla
Yeah.
suspension,
But by
airbags.
default, what we do by default
Yeah.
is we say we'll set it at that because
Yeah.
it's not Tesla power, but it's definitely more than you had before, and it's finding that real sweet spot. We're in North Yorkshire in the UK, so we've got such a variety of landscape around us. So
Yeah.
we've got long stretches of motorway literally right on our doorstep. We've got kind of huge vales. We've got back alley roads. And then we've also got a huge, I think it's a 30% incline
Oh,
place called
wow.
Sutton Bank just nearby us. So every single bus we do does Sutton Bank
Yeah.
because it's the
Good proving
test.
grounds.
And then
Yeah.
we get a hot chocolate at the top and we come back down again because it's our ultimate test for the cooling system.
Yeah.
So but it's really great fun. And like I said, it's that it takes away that fear of the vehicle. It takes away that fear or the routine or suddenly you open these buses up to a massively wider audience of people that can
Yeah.
not just drive them but really enjoy them.
Hmm.
And makes us a lot more likely that they're going to be with us for another, like you say, 50 to 100 years time. That would be
I mean,
amazing.
really timeless, right? I mean, I just, again, I can't think of a single reason why something like this wouldn't exist 100 years in the future. All we need is a drivetrain.
Mm,
The car itself doesn't have software. Like if you go out, like I drive a Tesla and I wonder, where is this car going to be 20 years from now?
yeah.
And the sad thing is it's probably not going to be on the road.
Mm,
Each system in there has its own specific firmware, software for it, unique parts, the charging system versus the drive system versus, the entertainment and display. And all of these parts aren't going to be continued to be built. And they're definitely serviceable parts that wear out, screens wear
yeah.
out, displays, batteries, all this stuff. But you look at, what you're doing, what we're doing with the conversions, and you can really take like 100 years from now, we could take, maybe it'll be on the Cybertruck version 22 or something then.
Yeah.
But we could take that drivetrain out and put it into our chassis and our bus. The door is still going to slam with that
Yeah.
same sound and the same action. Everything about the car is going to be the same.
Mm,
Uh, and you can't say that for all these, you can't, there's no knobs in a Tesla. You can't even hit a dash switch to turn headlights on or whatever it might be without, using the touch screen.
yeah.
And so once you have all that reliance on that technology, you've essentially shortened the life of that product.
It goes from that kind of bolt-on method that we both focus on as well, about having something we're not. There are so many vehicles like this that keep kind of an external look, but everything underneath has been completely rechanged and re-altered and remanufactured. But this is it's a modular system. It's like, well,
Yeah.
right now this is the best version, in it goes. 10
Yep.
years time, it will definitely be different, but at least you can
Yeah.
change that bit, not just the
Yeah.
whole vehicle and throw it away. We have
Yeah.
that argument. I mean, obviously, we're now faced with the ID Buzz being a pretty direct comparison for a lot of
Yeah.
people. And so to be able to say that's great, like, of course, if you want an ID Buzz, go for it. It's a brilliant car. But
Yeah.
if a part gets superseded or doesn't last very long on an ID Buzz, you can't just change that part. You've got to throw the whole thing out. So
Yeah.
whereas our campers and eDub, if you get better charging technology, you just swap that bit. And that's
Yeah.
what makes them so timeless, isn't it?
Yeah. And you have the insurance component too, the cost to repair. If you go out and crash a vintage vehicle, you're mainly just, hammering the panels straight and, doing body work and painting it. We see now like the smallest amount of damage on these modern cars, the insurance company will total it out because the cost to replace and repair those products is so high. In a way that artificially shortens the life as well,
It does.
because these cars can barely take a serious hit now. And the party that's financially responsible, the insurance company, they ultimately make that decision. And they're just like, this isn't worth it. So yeah, you could go out and get a brand new ID Buzz, love it, start a whole family in it and have this emotional attachment, and somebody just barely rear ends you and it pops off an airbag and nope, to the
Done.
junkyard, whole thing, just bin it, throw it away. And it's mind blowing because I've seen some pretty messed up buses, rollovers and things like that. And guys will just, pound out the steel, cut it, weld it, grind it, sand it. And
Yeah,
next thing you know, you're square again,
exactly.
and
You're back on the road.
value, it doesn't really lose the value. It's a vintage car. So your value is constantly going up.
Yeah, it just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Perfect. I've kept you
Okay.
for a very long time, and we've got work to do. But I
Yeah.
want to ask you one final question. So I wanted first of all just to say thank you again for spending all this time with us,
The
and
pleasure's
taking
mine.
this
Thanks. Yeah.
wonderful trip down memory lane, which
Yeah.
might just be you and me having a natter about what we care about, but hopefully
Yeah.
some people will
I
find it
mean, yeah.
interesting.
Who cares? I know you're recording this, but really, I was just like, oh, cool. Let's catch up with Kit.
Yeah, I'm lying. I haven't recorded this at all. It's just an excuse for a chat.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you one final question, which was, what does the future hold for EV West?
A lot of the same, I mean, you can tell if you just kind of compartmentalize and package my thoughts over the last hour. Uh, you know, we very much are focused on this period of cars, so people are like, oh, can you do a Sprinter van or can you do this? And, ultimately people should understand with enough money, we can do anything, right? We could go to Mars, we could go to the moon. We did it back in 69, but we haven't been in 50 years uh, because, maybe it wasn't prudent, maybe we didn't have a reason. Um, so it's kind of one of those things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? And so I think for us, for EV West, it's going to be focusing, on the applications that give us the best return on that investment, right? You try to be an example of what you want other people to be. And this is all temporary, right? Because you and I both know 10 years from now, if you wanted an adventure van, there's going to be several options on the market, right? You'll be able to buy a Ford Transit, you'll be able to buy a Dodge Ram, you'll be able to buy an e-Sprinter. Any of these products, you'll be able to go down to the dealer and just buy one. And no matter what, even if it's $100,000 for that van, it's still going to be, half as much or less. It's going to be a small fraction of the cost of what it would take to convert something with comparable specification. Again, we kind of mentioned it earlier. There's people out there making, 200, 300, $400,000 conversions. That's not going to change anything overnight. What's going to change is companies like yours that literally have small fleets of vehicles available to rent. If somebody rents it and they really love it, they can come to you and actually get that same vehicle built by you affordably, where you actually take the amount of money they invested and you look at the final product that rolls out of your shop, and they're fairly comparable. Like what we're seeing is the amount of money that people generally invest in these conversions. If they start with a desirable vintage platform, they end up with a product that has roughly that same value, right? But if you tried to do this with anything modern, you couldn't come close. It would be way too difficult, right? Um, take an F-150 and try and give it 300 miles of range and keep it under 70 or 80 grand, which you can go buy a Lightning for.
Yeah.
That's just impossible. 70 grand, I could probably give you 100 miles of range in an F-150, but it's not going to have tow capacity or, any of that stuff. So I think, keeping the industry, keeping the customers and the demographic focused, keep the focus on feasibility. And that's what we're trying to be like, really, people are like, why don't you do this car? And why don't you do that car? And it's like, we haven't even come close to perfecting the Beetle and the bus and the Porsche.
Yeah.
And that's our true love. That's like our first love. So, maybe when we get those systems, perfected to the point where you spend maybe $15,000 on parts and everything for the most part bolts in, the harnesses all kind of click together with plugs, a little bit of light fabrication work, and maybe a week or two later, you have a running vehicle.
Mm.
that's our goal, right? So that's the future of where we want to be. You know, how long that's going to take, I don't know. A lot of it depends on the availability of parts and, you know, OEM. And I'm just as excited as everyone else for newer, safer batteries, solid state stuff, you know, motors that are built, you know, without rare earth elements. There's a lot of improvement that we can do within our industry. And I think as long as we highlight that and push for that, we'll get to where we want to be, you know. And that's what drives a lot of guys like you and I. It's not like we're Tesla fanboys or anything like that. We're really looking after our customers and our cars. And if you erase all the brand names and you look at quantitative metrics that you can measure, you know, cost dollars per watt hour, or you know, a dollar for every kilowatt of horsepower, things like that. There does tend to be one brand that always kind of trickles up to the top and gives people the best value, the best bang for their dollar. And that's really, I think it's important to note that for people watching, that that's why we're using this. We're not trying to turn a bus into a Tesla. We're trying to keep the bus doing what it was intended to do, take families out on adventures, be very versatile, throw the surfboards in it one weekend, and the next weekend haul a bunch of boxes to work or something like that. And just having that functionality of the bus and having to worry the least about your range and your power and the cost of all that. And you know, that's the metric, the quantitative metric that you can measure and be like, okay, we're improving, we're getting this much energy for this price, and we can actually watch that metric improve.
Perfect. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Michael, I want to thank you again for the time you've given to us today. And also just a kind of rounding off note to our viewers, if you've stuck with us for this. I mean, at time of recording, we've been nattering a little while now. We will, I'm sure I'll trim this down. YouTube won't like me if I keep it at full length. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, if you're watching this video and you're interested in the technology, maybe you've been following the electric conversion market for a little while, then you've got two companies right here that you can go and investigate. EV West over in the States as you've heard, have got a long legacy and a ton of content online to have a look at. But yeah, check out their YouTube channel as well. And if you like what you're looking at, then like and subscribe these videos. And as always, drop some comments below. Get in touch if you've got any questions. We would love to hear from you with any ideas you've got. So that's me signing off. And Michael, thanks again for your time.
Yeah, thanks, kid. I really appreciate it. It was a great time, and it's good to get, you know, a lot of this information out there. And believe it or not, some people are interested in this boring stuff.
Perfect.